So it's been a week of sharpening irons on these stones, and what you can see here is I have a condition for cleaning immediately after sharpening and a condition for cleaning a week later. So grinding for a week and then cleaning it a week later. And so I'm going to walk you through these. So these are the stones that were cleaned immediately. You can see pretty closely that these two conditions are actually the ones that are the cleanest out of the 5. So this is Windex. So grind. So I always used water as my lubricant for sharpening. So sharpened, immediately wiped off with Windex. So sprayed Windex, wiped it off. This one is actually 3-in-1 oil, and I'll tell you why that's interesting in a second. The dirtiest looking one is actually mineral oil, followed by fluid film, which is a lanolin based spray. And then this condition is actually just water. So this is actually my control condition. So I sprayed with water as a lubricant, and then I cleaned it off with water. So some observations. The ones that were spray bottles, so like the Windex or the water, came in this little spray bottle. You could immediately see that there was an effect, especially on this water right here, that you can tell wherever the spray hit is actually the cleanest bits. And so same thing happened with Windex, but it just kind of carried everything off, whereas the water didn't necessarily do so. Mineral oil is a light oil, and it just kind of kept sitting in there. Fluid film has this fun little property where it kind of bubbles, and was kind of hoping that would actually take things away, but it didn't happen immediately. The interesting part about the 3-in-1 oil is that at first it was clogging up, and there's a reason they tell you not to mix water and oil. And that's because it'll do this thing where it starts creating a barrier against the water. So if you see here, the water's beating on top of it. So what you see here is the water is actually beating on top of the surface rather than being absorbed. Which has its good and bad parts. I mean, the nice part about it is that you definitely have the water sitting on top and not being soaked into the stone, which means you have like a pretty good slurry going. And the added benefit of this is that with the 3-in-1 oil as your cleaner, it just kind of comes off. So that's what's up with the immediate condition. Here are the ones that I used for a week, didn't clean them off, which is not what you want to do. But some of these oils and cleaners actually might have a better effect if they're left on longer. And there is a little bit of a difference. So again, the cleanest ones are Windex again, and then water, interestingly enough. And I'll talk about why that might be. And what you see here is that the 3-in-1 oil is actually the dirtiest. So because the 3-in-1 oil wasn't creating that protective barrier against water, it just all stuck in there. And then adding the 3-in-1 oil did nothing other than add oil to the mix. This one is the fluid film, which actually had a really interesting property, and you kind of see it here, is that adding the fluid film, it did the bubbling effect, and you can see it actually took away quite a bit up until this end bit here where it didn't spray nearly as much. So the fluid film does kind of work as hypothesized, where the bubbles do create some sort of lifting ability, but it doesn't work immediately, right? If you clean your stone immediately, it doesn't work. But if you let your stone get dirty, it does work, which is interesting. And then this condition is the mineral oil, which honestly looks just as dirty as it did when you use the mineral oil immediately. What seems to be happening with the water is that, right, all the gunk had stayed on. And again, as I said, with the substances that were coming out of a spray bottle rather than, just like a liquid that you took out of a bottle and dripped on, the spray bottle does come out with some force, and you can see the little spots where I was hitting it with the spray bottle immediately, and then that action is actually the force of the spray bottle actually is the part that's taking off some of the stuff. But Windex, still really clean. So the only thing that's left in there is all the gunk that had been like sitting in there for a week, like a little bit longer than the rest of it. So what does that mean? What I've found is that I'll probably use Windex or water, just because like they're coming out of spray bottles. The force of the liquid coming out of the spray bottle does help. And given how I'm usually mostly using water or mineral oil on this, it's probably going to work out pretty good. So typically using these stones, I will use mineral oil. I probably won't use mineral oil to clean it. However, this is the stone that I regularly use, and I use mineral oil on this as my lubricant. And I typically clean it right after I use it, to just take all the mineral oil off as well as all the gunk. And I don't really use a different thing. I just wipe it off. And so this shows the same, amount of dirt, or just a little bit more of dirt than Windex. So, I mean, I'm probably just not going to change what I do. So with that in mind, this experiment is not comprehensive, right? So, like, using fluid film after it's been a while, maybe using a combination of 3-in-1 oil and water is not going to be super detrimental. Like, people are very adamant about you should never mix oil and water when you're using your stones. But, I mean, like, it certainly helped, actually, in terms of cleaning. And quite honestly, I don't think it makes a difference on slurries. Another caveat of this experiment is that I only use the same stone. It's entirely possible that if you're using a denser stone, like a black arc or something like that, that you would have completely different results, because these are fairly porous. And when you use water on them, they soak up water. They also soak up mineral oil. So, I mean, it is what it is. This experiment isn't meant to make anyone change their mind about any of these things. It's just a fun experiment that I wanted to satisfy my own curiosity. Because I was talking to Adam about, different ways of cleaning these stones and stuff like that. And he's tried a bunch of stuff. Fluid film really works for him and the way he uses his stones. The way I use my stones, I'll probably just keep doing mineral oil and just wiping it clean right afterwards. In the comments below, what questions you have. I've had like a couple observations that I've made during this experiment. I mean, let me know what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and let's just have like a fun conversation about stones. All right. So, I might do some more playing around with this just because like I want to satisfy my own curiosity if perhaps longer times using these things with these different lubricants and stuff would be more helpful, because like after a few days of doing the 3-in-1 oil, immediately like it wasn't showing any differences, and then after that 3-in-1 oil kind of got soaked into the stone and becoming essentially a protective barrier for water, it really was showing a lot more cleaning action. So, I mean, lots of things to think about and only more questions to pursue. See you around the workbench, I guess.